Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm very excited to talk about a new Sisay build. Very excited. Sisay Weatherlight Captain, no Jeggy this time, no Jeggy. No super like formal video. Just gonna look at a list and talk about it. So let's get into it. So today's list is called Survival Captain / Jeggy's on Vacay. Basically, this idea came to me when a friend asked me to look over a list that doesn't have Jeggy that won a tournament. So I decided to look into how I would optimize that deck, and I ended up just redesigning the whole thing. So a lot of this deck comes from my experience playing Tymna, Protein Hulk, the Spite deck. I've been playing for MLC. Playing like a slightly stacksy deck that's pretty proactive, but also using like a survival of the fittest very well. This is also kind of based on my experience playing Golden Reanimator, my Tasigur list that plays Neoform on Tasigur to find like Scholar of the Lost Trove into a Razaketh list, but it also plays survival of the fittest. At least it should. This is an older list, so it should play it here. But survival is basically just like a very strong enchantment right now, because you can just pitch any of your dorks into like a hull breacher or an opposition agent, which is extremely strong. So that's why I really like survival right now, among other things. But survival is very useful. You can discard creatures or legends, and like in Spleenface's TNT Razaketh's list, you can discard like Razaketh to find the loyal retainers, I think, and then you sacrifice the loyal retainers and get back the Razaketh. So survival is very good right now. Also, this deck was inspired by Sisay Elk. Well, I've been playing Sisay Elk lately, and a lot of the games, I think half the games I play, I don't even need to play Jeggy out. The stacks is just so strong, like Deafening Silence, Rest in Peace, and also I think some other things like the tax effects here, like the Rin Wingmare and the Thalia. I think I have a 3-ball, like Trinisphere, Thorn of Amethyst, like all these things are doing such a good job tempoing out our opponents, and then playing things like Lannery Storm and Malcolm to like to offset the tax and let us still play cards and combo out that way. I found that like it's just a very strong like stacks list for some reason, and like yeah, really good beaters. You sometimes don't even need Jeggy, you just get Samu and just start beating face, and you get Shalai and like Derevi and stuff. So you have the way to go like fast, which is why I like in a stacks list, like you still have a way to be proactive about getting your wincon, because that's the benefit of Sisay and Jeggy, right? Like it's inevitable, like no matter what, as long as you can play like get mana by playing Calling Ritual, Jessica's Will, or like all of the good rocks and all the good spells, like the good ritual spells. Eventually you'll get there no matter what, if the game goes long enough, which is a good benefit to have, I think, in cEDH. It makes your mulligans very simple. You don't have to focus on finding your wincon, because you just mulligan for whatever your strategy is for the game, and then you go for it. I mean, you know how this deck plays. If you want to know more, there's another video. But the idea, the hypothesis is like, well, if this deck can play that well, like without Jeggy, honestly, like why don't we try an example where we don't play Jeggy, right? And if we don't play Jeggy, then what's the benefits that we're getting back? We get Force of Will, which is something I've said I don't really miss. I don't really care if I get Force of Will back. The main thing I really like getting back is Ranger Captain of Eos. I also like getting Selvala. Selvala's pretty big. The other really big one is Emiel. So you get some like really good stuff. There's Dauthi Voidwalker, which is something I wanted as well. Finale is pretty good, but not essential. The other thing, of course, is Thassa's Oracle. We have Selvala, Maralen, and what else? Yeah, we get Thassa's Oracle back, which I said in my other video that if you want to play a Thoracle deck, don't play Sisay. And I still kind of stand by that statement, but if we're not gonna play Jeggy, then we might as well play like one of the best most compact wincons in the game, right? I think something I've talked about with Callahan on Twitter recently is like, why is Thoracle so good? My stance is like, Thoracle isn't really the issue, it's Underworld Breach that's the issue, because Storm decks it makes the ad nauseum very simple when you just turbo Nas and get your assembled Breach and LED, and you just, it doesn't matter what your wincon is. That's why there's so many like turbo Nas lists on other colors that are very successful, like Mardu. Thoracle isn't really the issue, but the counter argument is that Thoracle makes it very difficult for stacks decks to attack the table when there's so many different axes that you're attacking, right? So like you need a rest in peace for the Underworld Breach, but if you over index into like Graveyard Hate, the Storm deck can always just pivot into playing Thoracle, which is like requires a different type of hate, right? You need a Torpor Orb or like other stuff like that. But the idea is that there's so many different axes that you would need to try to keep like focus on to try and stop a Storm list. That's why Thoracle is really good, right? Like it's kind of difficult to stop once it ETPs. You have a trigger, then you have the spell. I think having different ways to win that way makes the deck very good, right? So that's kind of the same idea I have over here. Is like, well, we're playing a 5-color Sisay list without Jeggy. We're gonna play Thoracle. We're just gonna play Thoracle no matter what, because we're not playing not that many artifacts here, because as I mentioned before, like compared to Jeggy, like you're not really using Mana Vault, you're not really using like Grim Monolith. I don't have it over here anymore because I'm not going fast, but you don't have Grim Monolith, you don't have a lot of the good colorless artifacts, like aside from like Mana Crypt Soul Ring, of course, because that doesn't really feel Sisay's like primary plan of fetching out stuff. But the benefit of that is that we are not as dependent on our artifacts as Storm decks are, so we can play things like Collector Oof. We can also then play more dorks, so we don't feed opposing Docksides to like kind of reduce the ability for Storm decks to kind of go off with their Dockside. So I think that's good. And also the important part behind having a lot of dorks is that it maximizes the ability for us to use survival to find things. But the premise behind this deck is basically Sisay we know can step up into a win. Like there are many different lines you can, like, I don't know, assemble. Like I used to do Selvala into Derevi and then into Najeela, then you enter combat, and then you enter combat with the Selvala, and then you find a way to untap the Selvala. Najeela then lets you untap and get infinite mana, then you fetch out like a 3 fairy and a Jace and, like, I don't know, get a Kenrith and draw your deck. Like there's so many different permutations that you can do. You can do Dragon Nicobol's Dragon God combo. There's a lot of different ways Sisay can win if she has a lot of different activations. But as I mentioned in my other video, I don't like playing around with that strategy myself, because there's only so few turns, and even if we play things like Deafening Silence, it's not guaranteed, right? When you're playing stacks, you're not trying to lock the board indefinitely. The ideal is to disrupt the table long enough while you're assembling your win. Like a Heliod or like a Godo, they're very clear in what they're supposed to do. Like Heliod is trying to assemble a Walking Ballista, Godo is trying to find the Helm, like get mana, play Godo and play Helm. And while Sisay, I think even though you assemble a Deafening Silence, if we play solely around the plan of like fetching for like some legend that pumps her for 2, then you fetch like your 3 mana thing, which I think 2 fetches is probably enough to like get you to the whole line. But that still means we have to get 5 mana through our dorks, our rocks, or our lands, and then kind of, while also trying to like tempo out the board, or like slow down the board with our stacks, and then try and play like that game, which I think is asking for a lot for like a mid-range like stacks list. Like if we look at Tymna, Tana, Protean Hulk, like you can play like the Archon and stuff like that because it fuels your Tymna, and it's very easy for you to win. This deck is surprisingly easy. Like this is probably like, unfortunately, one of my favorite decks of my options in MLC, because it's like super easy to just like get a Protean Hulk, like, and then like reanimate it somehow. Like I played a lot of games with this, and like you can even just like have a dork and play a Fiend Artisan and Fiend Artisan into like Academy Rector or whatever you want. There's a lot of ways to get there, so you're not really doing a similar thing of Sisay, where Sisay has to like kind of step up or whatever, or like you have to pick between like 5 mana activation or like building out your board. But that doesn't mean we don't play around it, right? So the deck's about having a lot of different paths to win. We have the fastest Oracle line, which is benefited from the Neoform. So the Neoform is really strong here because Neoform just turns all our dorks into a Thassa's Oracle. Neoform can also turn Sisay into an Emiel, which is important. I'll explain why later. You can probably imagine why already. But Neoform also turns our dorks into like relevant stack speeds like Collector Oof or like Dranith Magistrate, or Gilded Drake even. You can step up your 2 into your 3, but we don't have any good 2s that we probably want to trade off. You can also just do 1 into like Dockside, so Neoform is really strong. But Neoform is like a way for us to win. You can also get a Spellseeker to then find Neoform, then Neoform the Spellseeker into Emiel. So this is like a pretty critical piece. But as I was saying, we have our primary line of Thassa's Oracle. Like, being able to play Thassa's Oracle on a 5-color deck means like you can just have the nuts, like you can just have the hand of like land mana Oracle console or whatever, right? And maybe even a silence, and in that, like having that possibility already makes the deck pretty strong in my opinion. But that's one axis. The other axis is Sisay actually has 2 A+B combos that the one part is not legendary, the other part is. So the first one is Emiel Dockside, and the idea is like if I play a Dockside, I just fetch out Emiel somehow, or I Neoform into Emiel, or use Survival into find my Emiel, and then I win that way. The win line here is basically Emiel with Derevi and 3 fairy, and you lock down the board permanently. Like everyone, you tap them out on their upkeep by blinking Derevi with infinite mana. You also need like a mana source to let you like blink it, of course, but like get like Gas Cradle or something like that. But the idea is you tap them out permanently. The next step is you have a Shalai, and then you like pump up everyone infinitely and then like kill everyone. That's your one win con. You don't need to like bother with like a Jace or like a Thrasios to draw your deck, because you're trying to save, like be slot efficient. So that I think that's very, very strong already. The next thing is Maralen. So this is something I'm taking from the Spike deck, where, as I mentioned earlier, survival into opposition agent is like a strong line, right? So that's something you want to play for already. So imagine you have survival and you're playing towards getting opposition agent, or you open with opposition agent. That's your line, right? Then it's very simple. You get to play your opposition agent, stop the table, build some tempo, or like build some time for yourself, and then you step your way into a Maralen, and then like find a way to protect the Maralen as well, ideally, and then you get that win. So you can see how in this deck Sisay can help you find like a one part of the A+B combo, as long as you get the non-legendary part. And that's very simple to find with your Eldamri's Call, like Whirly Tutor, your regular tutors like Vampire Tutor, Imperial Seal, and like Survival, and like Neoform. Like there's so many different ways you can get there. So I think I really like the idea that there's so many different axes that this deck can attack, that it's like you can play mid-range, tempo out stacks out the table to stop the stormless. Then based on what you like open with or mulligan or whatever, then you can assemble your win and get there. And like just never forget, you always have Thoracle console as your win con. And the last thing that I think is very, very relevant or very useful for Sisay in this list is that Sisay is a commander that lets you find 3 fairy at like any time you want. So what you do is just like, if you have Thoracle console in hand, everyone's playing super carefully, you just step your way into a 3 fairy and just like play. If you want to play safe that way, you can, and I think that's very powerful. As we know, 3 fairy is also a Dockside doubler, so there's just so many different things you can do with this deck that I surprisingly have like a lot of success with it. I thought it'd be like a little bit too like, I don't know, kind of scatterbrained. I don't know how to explain it. Like there's so many different things happening that I thought it might be trying to do too much at once, but all gels very well, and I'm having a lot of fun playing this. It's very strong. So I might do some like gameplay like reviews of this deck to demonstrate how it works, but so far I really like this list, and I think I'll be piloting it more in the future. So yeah. Oh, some other things to keep in mind, I guess. This list doesn't play Underworld Breach. The reason why it doesn't play Underworld Breach is just, as I've learned from playing Jeggy with Underworld Breach before, back in the like 1.1 or whatever, when I called it Freeze Elk, as a joke on Freeze Thief, is that this deck is just not good as an Underworld Breach list. normally when you play your storm list, you're naturally building up your graveyard a lot by playing your rituals and your like land, sacrificing your lands and playing other spells and non-permanents, that a lot of the cards that you're drawing and stuff like that just won't be tied up in the board, so that when you play Underworld Breach, you do have a little bit of wiggle room to like kind of get there, like cast your Imperial Seal or Intuition or whatever a couple times. Where Sisay, I found that it was just always too tight, it was always too difficult. Like either you have the exact perfect like exact perfect setup and it doesn't matter, or you're always like maybe a couple cards away, or it's too easily disrupted. Like a Deathrite Shaman can take you like off of being able to escape cards with Underworld Breach. So that's why it's not a breach list. It takes up too many slots as well, because we need Brain Freeze, Savine's Reclamation, or Grinding Station, or whatever permutation we want. LED, like I think Underworld Breach is just kind of asking for too much here when we already have so many different ways to win. We have like our Thoracles, we have Spell Seekers and the stuff, we have Emiel Dockside, we have Emiel Dockside, we have Maralen. There's just already so many different things we can do. I don't think we need a Underworld Breach in this deck. Also, this deck is kind of light on legends and other options like that, like compared to my Jeggy list. Like I can even do a comparison actually. Let's do compare. So looking at our list, I know this one is a little bit lighter on legends compared to like even my Jeggy list, which is already very lean on legends compared to other Sisay lists. Like we don't have Oko, we don't have Najeela, we don't have Karn, and also Thalia, Valky, Captain Landristore, Malcolm, Samut. Like I don't think everyone plays those anyways. Generally they play Oko, they might play Najeela. If they're playing on Najeela, they're gonna be playing Samut. But yeah, I think this list is lean on legends. The only ones we're really playing is Kinnan, at least for me, and also Selvala. So Kinnan is just generally useful. There's no combos with Kinnan. It's just the fact that we have so many dorks that I think Kinnan is generally useful. Not to activate Sisay because it doubles the same color, but just as a way to have more mana. I think it's useful. Mana is always good. Selvala's our way to like kind of step up into Sisay very easily. If you can end step Selvala, generally you're gonna win, because you end step Selvala, find Derevi, untap Selvala, tap Selvala again, and like find whatever, and then if you have creatures to attack with to trigger that Derevi, you can then find like your Emiel and like Gaia's Cradle and win that way. So I generally like Selvala a lot. Also Selvala just gives you mana again, so not like the worst. 3 mana is a little rough, but whatever. And this deck doesn't play any other legends, like even like Captain Landry Storm or like Malcolm, which are things I like generally to like grind, or like even a Karn. And that's just like because we're trying to make so many different things work that I don't really want those legends. Like as I mentioned earlier, this deck is really about just trying to like drop some of like early stacks and then like assemble our A+B and win that way. I don't really want to deal with like gumming up my hand of legends that don't directly contribute to my plan, and also like are generally more expensive to play. So you might be wondering why this list is still on Elves of Deep Shadow and like Avacyn's Pilgrim and even Finhorn Elves. Like you're wondering like why play those, right? Versus like maybe even Captain Landry Storm. What I found is after mulliganing a couple hands at the beginning, this deck just really needs to hit the turn 1 dork, and also having those dorks just makes it easier for you to like get discard them to like survival, and also the 1 and the 2 from like Neoform is just very relevant. So I found the dorks are just actually very, very useful, more useful than like even having like a Valkyrie or like whatever cute value legend that I can add. Also, you're probably wondering why there's no Asmora. I thought about Asmora. It just takes too much effort to like get there. Like Asmora, the only reason why you want Asmora is to like buy yourself an extra turn, or like save yourself a turn so that when you fetch into a legend, so Sisay's already 3 into a 4, Sisay's into a 4, and then you don't have to go like on a 1, then like 3 or whatever, just that. Asmora, if you're gonna play Asmora, you probably want the cookbook just because you want to like get those foods easier. You could play like Tyros Provisioner, but like I don't know, if you want Asmora, like if you want Asmora to step like to quickly step up, then okay, like I'm not a big fan of that. But if you want Asmora as a way to deal with an opposition agent, then like play a card that does that better, as opposed to playing a card that makes you like play a thing, discard cards, get foods, then like do a roundabout like thing to kill a creature. That's why I'm not playing Asmora. And yeah, that's the deck. So far, Survival Captain's been doing really good for me, and I'm excited to show you in the future.